let the entire machine make you money. I love that line. And so as you look at this, really look at how, like, we haven't talked about all the revenue pods because it's important to get this marketing concept in your heads so that you begin to think from these three foundational pillars as you begin to build out the business. Welcome to Mastering Restaurant Revenue, turning restaurant dreams into significant profit. We're your hosts, Bruce Russo, 550 plus restaurant concepts designed and built, and a tower of national and regional awards. He's the GOAT of restaurant design and build for money-making operations. And I'm Diane Armitage, 30 years leading a global marketing agency. I help restaurants design not just a space, but a profit machine. Every Tuesday morning at 7 a.m., you can find us on your favorite podcast platform or our YouTube channel. Just search Mastering Restaurant Revenue at YouTube. And please like, subscribe, and share. Very much appreciated. And our website, oddly the same name, masteringrestaurantrevenue.com, sends you an email reminder when the podcast drops and gets you involved in contests and live Q&A episodes with us with prizes that might even include you coming on our show. In fact, our first contest, Bruce, is coming up this weekend, and it has to do with one of our last episodes on the most amazing and stunning DIY or restaurant hacks that you've seen to keep things running. And no, Bruce, you can't enter the contest.
No, I'll sit this one out.
No. Okay, so Bruce, the number one reason why restaurants hire you, why do you think the number one reason is that they hire you?
To design the restaurant to make money.
Dang right.
As
and
a
the number one
complete
reason
package.
why it is a complete package, which we're going to hear about today. The number one reason why restaurants hire me, they're always asking me, how are we going to make more money this year? So they hire you to design a restaurant to make more money, and then they come to me and ask me how they're going to make more money. Unfortunately, this usually happens after they've had a great opening, and then they start to slump and slide in the numbers, and then they call me. And that's okay. I can definitely help. But I've got to tell you, just like Bruce, it's better to have a strong restaurant marketer with a strategy all the way from the day you receive your business license for the space you're planning to fill.
Yes.
It could be a second generation restaurant. It could be an empty asphalt square in a parking lot somewhere. It doesn't matter. That's when you should be calling me in. What do you think about that, Bruce?
I think you should even be earlier than that. Probably like you need to be on board after the second schematic design has been reviewed with the owner. Because then that's when I point to you what the revenue pods that I'm designing, which lets you build your marketing strategy accordingly. It starts that early. It starts that early,
well,
trust me.
And it may even start earlier than that, because in many cases, Bruce, when people come to you, I'm sure one of the first questions you ask them is, what's your brand? What do you want? What's the look you want? Right?
What's your ticket average?
What's your ticket average is key.
What's the ticket average? Yeah. We don't want to design a $300 ticket average restaurant for burgers and fries.
Exactly. Unless they're really famous burgers.
Yeah, but it doesn't work.
Made out of all kinds of different kinds of meat.
Yeah.
But no, I agree with you. So the branding is actually there at the schematic stage.
Correct.
And, I think in a lot of cases, restaurant owners will get involved in telling you what they want it to look like, or they have a menu that they want to build the whole concept around. But what they're really wanting to do, and what you see better than they do, is that they want to have an end result feeling with their clientele. And that end result feeling is what you design. It really is. Because they want to have this kind of energy. They want to have this kind of a ticket. They want to have this kind of that. And they tell you all of this. But what they're really telling you is, we want our clients to feel this way when they're in our restaurant. And I think that's what you're so good at designing.
Well, and it plays into what you do, because here's how I view it. The ambiance is the start and finish of the dining experience. Okay. So
it's the bookend.
There's about a 15 to 60 second ambiance period where that ambiance from design hands off to operations. And when that hands off to operations, whatever level that design is, that needs to be the level of operations. They need to go hand in hand. That's why it's so
Correct.
critical to design it all as a unit, because if you notice, the restaurants that really do well and seem to make money just falling off a log, really analyze what they're doing. When you walk in, and the handoff from the design and the ambiance when you first walked in the door to the handoff to the operations, it's flawless.
That is absolutely correct. And I love how you said that it ends in ambiance as well, because
Yes,
one of our most recent episodes was on restrooms, right?
correct.
And that tends to be the last place a woman will go to powder her nose. A man will go before he gets in the car. And
Correct.
that restroom has to have that psychic revenue pod. I like to call it the psychic revenue pod.
Correct.
So we've been talking a lot about how you implement revenue pods, but we also have psychic revenue pods that we'll be sharing with all of you. Yeah. So what I've always been teaching clients along the way is about the three foundational pillars. The three foundational pillars I teach to any of my marketing clients anywhere along their journey. And it starts with this analogy that the great Jay Abraham taught me years ago. Do you know Jay Abraham?
I don't.
Okay, you're the GOAT in restaurant design.
Uh-huh.
Jay is the GOAT of smart, strategic, leveraged marketing. He's been around since the early 70s. I first met Jay back in 1995 when I thought I was just going to be a freelance writer. And because of just these three things he taught me, I not only grew my business to many millions annually, but I was able to help my clients all over the world do the same in every single industry. It didn't matter if they were like a person who just published a book, or if they were like a giant entity, with offices everywhere, like Remax, right? Or giant motivational speakers like Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield and Chicken Soup for the Soul. And of course, many, many restaurants and resorts. So I had this privilege of really working directly with Jay, mentoring directly with him, even writing his famous sales letters with him for about 3 years. And he's the GOAT. He's the GOAT of all goats. Every great marketer out there, you think that they made themselves? They didn't. They followed the GOAT. So the main reason most restaurants come to me, they say, we need more money. And what they're really thinking is, we need more clients, because most restaurants think that in order to bring in more money, they've got to bring in more clients. Now, Jay always referred to this as the diving board syndrome. You've got one way of bringing in clients, and you're out there on your single diving board, only one channel of revenue in your mind, activity, distribution channel, whatever it is, and it's sustaining 100% of your revenue. Your mindset is, we must bring in more clients. And you're out there on that board and you're boinging and you're boinging. But when the economy suddenly shifts, or when COVID hits, your big old pool down there just dries up and drains away. And here you are standing on this diving board with nowhere to go. So the diving board is a boom and bust cycle of business. You're putting a lot of time and effort into one activity that's not necessarily leveraged for you in any other aspect of your business. So he always talked about building the Parthenon instead. The key is to think like a Parthenon builder, like in Athens. Multiple pillars of strategy in play, multiple pillars of income. Make sense?
Multiple revenue pods.
Of course it makes sense to you. You're a genius, because you're the only guy I've ever talked to about implementing multiple revenue pods into any restaurant business. You're always talking about multiple pillars of income.
Yes.
So why do we build this way?
Well, as I said in many shows and many times, the revenue pod, each revenue pod, and there's minimum 3, can you get up to 10 or 15? It depends on the concept. But simply, you have the dining room, the bar, and the wine sales. That's your 3 typical in a fairly upscale restaurant. So, and they all operate different. The analogy of being on a diving board is a good analogy, because you don't want to have the hostess holding the menus and a wine bottle and standing on the diving board looking for a place to sit. See what I'm saying? So although there is only typically one entry to a restaurant, it's that 1001, 1002, 1003 look that every client does when they walk in a restaurant. Okay, that the staff needs to be trained on how to read that. That's part of
Right.
training. They need to be trained on how to read that. And once they're trained and they understand, you just let the design work. The design works by itself.
Correct.
It shows people which way to go.
And so what you're saying is that you could be leading them into the dining room. They may want to be going into the bar for a different experience, a different revenue pod, right?
Correct.
And
Correct.
so you have these different functional pillars in place from the very beginning, or these functional revenue pods in place. Now, like you said, most restaurants only do 3. They're not thinking about all the other revenue pods that you and I teach about,
Correct.
right? So
Correct.
one pillar may not be as activated in the winter months, like the patio revenue pod, for instance. We've been talking about patios, right? So one pillar may go down a little bit, seasonal, or, when it's raining, but you've got other pillars in place, cocktail tables, things that you've implemented that will continue to sustain that level of income, right? Well, you may have a pillar go down completely. Like,
Correct.
what day was it? January 17th, 1920. What happened on that day? Do you know? Prohibition.
There you go.
Prohibition entered as a law, and the entire country went dry at midnight that night, right? Now, we both know that all sorts of restaurants found their way around that little inconvenience, right? But for the majority of restaurants out there who decided to follow the new rule, it would be like today, suddenly your bar revenue, your cocktail table revenue pod, even your wine program revenue pod would dry up in a day. Like when COVID hit, my friend Ruben and I were just talking about this on my Best of Laguna Beach radio show last Monday. While every restaurant was bemoaning their future existence, 3 restaurants here in Laguna Beach were up and running fast and furious in takeout business in like 2 days. So when you have multiple pillars in place, revenue pods, as you've coined for us, you're giving yourself leverage, right? You're allowing yourself to pivot. You can turn on a dime. It allows you to move more freely with new ideas, trying new ideas in different parts of that concepts, in all of the different concepts, right? And it allows you to survive these expected seasonal slowdowns and these unexpected crises like COVID or prohibition. All right? Make sense?
Yeah.
So
Well, in a city like Laguna, you could pretty much set your calendar on when.
yes,
It's to the day, to the hour, the morning of.
it is.
When all the
Yes.
snowbirds go back, it's the morning of, the airport's crowded and all the restaurants are empty. And they stay empty for a period of time until they come back.
I could give you the exact week that it happens and the exact week it begins to build. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to look at these kinds of changes and you have to look at, okay, how are we going to have all of these different pods in place so that we keep the Parthenon standing, right? So that gets us back to the 3 foundational pillars that I teach to increase income. So when I ask my restaurant clients what they do to increase business, they give me a litany of marketing things that they've been trying. Oh, we're trying this and we're trying that, and we tried Yahoo ads and we tried Yelp ads and we did this and we did that. And, we put our lights up in Las Vegas on the big TikTok thing. And there are plenty of marketing and advertising employees out there for restaurants. Buy this and you'll make millions. Buy with our ads and you'll get new clients. Our hospitality industry is slathered in all of these expensive options. It's like overwhelming. But that's advertising. That comes later. That's not at the foundation of increasing business. So when it comes to 3 ways to increase business, increase income in any industry, especially in restaurants, there's only 3 things. 1, you increase the number of clients. 2, you increase the average size of the sale per client. And 3, you increase the number of times they return and buy again. Now, this also includes them helping you build your business, which turns into joint ventures, the beautiful land of joint ventures, but we'll be covering all of that in more episodes. So I'm going to repeat that again because the simplicity of this takes a little while to sink in. There are only 3 ways to increase income. Increase your number of clients, increase the average size of the sale per client, increase the number of times they return and buy again. Now, Bruce, in your business, design and build, your first goal was to increase clients.
Yes.
Then you increase the average size of the sale per client. But now you rely on increasing the number of times they return and buy again because you have multiple clients who come back to you for 10 concepts, 20 concepts. They just keep coming back to you, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
all of these keys work together. Now, anytime I go into a client business, it doesn't matter if they're just opening their doors of their first restaurant or if they're a global conglomeration. I always work the same way. I just need to figure out how to increase each of these 3 items by a scooch, a smidge, each of the 3 items. That's all we need. So this is what I encourage people to do when you're listening to this episode, right? Get out a piece of paper. It's not algebra. It's the simplest math ever. Bruce can do it in his head. So the first thing you do is you calculate your number of clients. You figure out the average amount of money they spend on a transaction, and you determine how often that client makes a purchase each year. It's pretty easy. So say you have 1,000 patrons, and they spend $100 with you, and they come in 2 times a year. So that's 1,000 times 100 times 2. What does that equal? 200,000. But if you just focus on increasing 10% across all 3 of these numbers, so you go from 1,000 clients to 1,100, you're adding just 100 clients. You go from $100 to 110. That's a tiny $10 increase. You go from 2 transactions to 2.2 transactions per year. Say they come in twice for dinner and once for bar food. So that's 1,100 times 110 times 2.2. Now you're at 200,200. So a 10% increase across the board exponentialized your income by 33%. If you focus on a 25% increase on each of the 3 pillars, right? You following me so far, Bruce?
Yeah. No, I get it because
Yeah.
there's more I'm going to add to this.
Oh, I know you are. So say you do a 25% increase, right? So now you're at 1,250 clients, 125 per sale times 2.5 transactions. Now you've like doubled your first numbers from 200,000 to 390,625. So this is where I help clients. I help them figure out how to tweak each pillar to increase their exponential growth. It's just these 3 things. So what do you want to add to that, my dear?
Well, to get specific with that, how do you do that in a restaurant? Well, you sit with your staff and say, hey, we really want you to upsell appetizers. And then you develop an appetizer menu and you put things on the menu like falafel. I'm sure you know what falafel is. And do you know the ingredients of falafel? It's probably one of the most economical things you could serve in a restaurant.
Right.
A golf ball size falafel probably has a total cost of 18 cents.
Mm-hmm.
You put 4 of those on the plate for $6. What's the profit margin on that?
Right. We just
And
ordered, my friends and I just ordered edamame, beautiful big bowl of edamame that was, kind of grilled. And then they, diced it up with they had all kinds of salt and beautiful stuff on it. Okay.
Yeah.
Huge bowl. I mean, how much does that cost? Pennies.
Yeah.
It was $15.
Yes. And probably at a $2.
Right. 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 So, as you start to look at these, you start looking at how you can increase across the board, and these revenue pods begin to fit in this. Now, most restaurants, they are only focused on curtain number 1. They're thinking of how to increase the number of clients, and they fall prey to this. We got to get more clients in the door. We got to get more clients in the door. Well, and if we can't get more clients, then we're going to haphazardly raise the prices, which is a really bad form of handling curtain number 2, increasing the size of the sale. But if you go back to where restaurants spend the most needless advertising dollars, across the life of your business, it is necessary to spend some advertising dollars, but the amount of spend that you designate changes dramatically when you look instead at how you can leverage your 3 pillars from within first. And that is Bruce's revenue pods.
Correct.
We've been talking the literal revenue pods, and then there's the psychic revenue pods. And what we're getting you to do here is to think, getting you to utilize what's already there in your business and your brand. right? The hidden assets, the untapped opportunities, the
Correct.
overlooked possibilities, right?
Let the entire machine make you money.
Let the entire machine make you money. I
There you
love that
go.
line. I love that
Yes.
line. And so as you look at this, really look at how, like, we haven't talked about all the revenue pods because it's important to get this marketing concept in your heads so that you begin to think from these three foundational pillars as you begin to build out the business, as you begin to change things in the business. Increasing the average size of the sale per client doesn't necessarily mean that you just have to rely on your serving staff to upsell something from the appetizer menu. You can have a separate bar menu. You can have a separate cocktail tables menu. You can have a wine program. You can have all of these things that increase the average size of the sale per client. And when you look at increasing the number of times they come back, they return and they buy again. Well,
And that's the
yes, we
key.
have.
It's easier to get a customer to return than it is to
Mhm.
develop a new customer because there's a cost.
Absolutely.
The cost to obtain a new customer versus the cost to maintain a customer, big difference there. It's a huge,
In the
it's a
in the
huge
restaurant
spread.
industry, it's about 20 times more expensive to get one customer in the door than it is to get that customer to return. And
Yes.
we have the most creative and innovative minds in the world in this industry.
Yes.
There are all kinds of ways that you can find ways to get your customers to return. And it's not just the psychic, but the psychic has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
That beautiful front entrance, that beautiful patio that has so much energy and fun, the restrooms, the live music you may be playing, the way that you're greeted, the way the bartenders greet you and work with you. It's all this mix that keeps bringing those people back again. And
The
when they come
quality,
back again,
the quality,
the quality of what was that?
the quality of the doorknob on the front door, the door hardware,
Yeah.
you need to spend some
Really?
serious money there. Yeah.
No way.
Yes.
Is that another trick of yours?
Oh, yeah. You always
That is
want a
really cool.
quality hardware on the front door, and the front door needs to be a quality entry door, and whatever the design may be.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, and the same goes for restrooms, you want that to be quality fixtures in there as well. I mean, not only to stand the test of
Yeah.
time, but to just impress people. Just be like,
I
wow,
just did a
this
concept
feels really
here
good.
in the Dallas Cowboys headquarters.
Mhm.
It was a burger shop. The overall facility is designed for walking traffic,
Mhm.
but in order to see the sign of the building that we just did, you got to be across the street. So when you're on the same side of the street walking up the sidewalk, you have no clue what you're walking past because the sign is above the canopy. So
We have
when you're
that problem a
walking
lot in
parallel with the
Laguna.
street, same thing in Laguna. So in this
Mhm.
particular case, I made the front door hardware a 3-foot circle. I put a pair of doors and split that circle, and then I laser cut the logo of the concept into that door pull.
I remember you showing me that.
So it was the door pull and the concept signage all in one.
Yeah, that was beautiful. And it was an eye catcher because the
Yes.
doors were beautiful.
Yes,
The doors were
exactly.
beautiful. It said, this is something significant to take a look at.
Correct.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean,
Yeah.
it's a upscale. It's more than a burger concept. There's other things on the menu, but it's more of like a simple kitchen kind of concept with burgers being the main ingredient on the
Mhm.
menu. But made all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that you think of the approaching traffic, the walking pedestrian traffic and the driving traffic? You were just telling me about the restaurant that you designed in Laguna Beach, which is now being taken over by a great concept, which I'm really happy to hear about. But tell me again how you looked at the limitations that you had to deal with the patio and why that was so important to pedestrian and drive-by traffic.
Well, on Ocean, majority of the traffic comes from the canyon side.
Mhm. Meaning they're coming in from, out there toward the ocean.
Toward the
Yeah.
ocean. Okay, so the curb appeal of that building, you see the front door and then the building, and then the patio. So
Right.
you don't
Boom, boom,
you don't
boom.
relate the patio energy with the entry of the building. I didn't have the ability to move it because of the historical.
Mhm.
If you're coming from the ocean side on Ocean, then you get hooked because you see the patio energy, then the entry door. Now,
Correct.
if I had my way, there's a pair of double doors that can be deemed as the entry door somewhat if they just left the doors open, because what it does is it's a double door entry to the patio.
Mhm.
And they can put the menu stand out there. They can put some nice pot landscape and really make that appeal as the entry. So when the client walks into the restaurant, they're catching the energy of the patio. And
Correct.
people energy breed people energy,
You
especially
know,
if
the other
there's a
thing I
line.
found, right. Well, indeed. I mean, our Zink's Cafe always has a line out the door and down the street, and people are always like, what is that restaurant? But back to the restaurant that you designed, you were telling me before we started the show about how the the drive-in traffic, which is coming this way and sees the patio last, doesn't see the patio because their head is already turned to look at the patio with all the energy
Across the
across the
street.
street.
Exactly. At
Right.
Hennessy. Yes.
And they're thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to go park somewhere and go to Hennessy's because that looks like it's fun. And that's really an interesting concept. Finney's Craft House came into our old White House restaurant, which was the first restaurant we ever had in Laguna Beach. It took, a long time to renovate that place. And they created a patio. I don't know that they increased the square footage of that patio only by a little because they were kind of limited to historical standards as well. But they will seat people on that patio. Same with Nick's, the other restaurant. They'll see people on the patio before they seat them inside. And most people
Yes.
want to be on the patio,
Yes.
but they will seat those people on the patio for what obvious reason? Because it generates energy and noise on the street as people are
Yes.
driving by and as people are, walking by. It's a very big deal. And so there you have a patio, like you were saying earlier, that serves two revenue pods. It serves a psychic revenue pod and it serves the actual literal revenue pod.
There's an ambiance that a table with 4 people and an umbrella send. The message it sends.
Mhm.
It sends a message of calm and tranquility. So the more you
Mhm.
put that on the front end of the facade, that's great energy to send the message out. Hey, look at us.
Mhm.
Look at our restaurant.
But, I also think that when you have a restaurant where people are allowed to sit at the counter, so to speak, and look out from the patio into the pedestrian traffic and all that kind of thing,
Yeah,
then you're creating an energy that's different than tranquility and calm.
very
You're
much so.
creating a, you know,
Yep.
people watching,
Yep.
kind of energy, fun, rowdier energy, I would say.
Well, it's a lower ticket average.
Yes, indeed.
They all
So
go
isn't it
hand in
amazing
hand.
how you design a patio to go with your ticket average, which goes with the branding that you do at the very beginning, which goes with what you're trying to have your clients feel as the end result. That really is what it is about.
Well, it
How do you want
is,
them
and
feeling?
correct. And normally, you wouldn't have a tailor-made suit and put it on and wear flip-flops with it. I mean, I'm sure there's parts of the country or there are parts of the world that's normal, but that's not normal. You see what I'm saying? So that glove
Right,
has to fit. It all has to be a package. And
right.
that's what I stress here. It's not just the design and it's not just the menu and it's not just the operations. It is a complete package. And
But
all that communication needs to happen while I'm putting lines on paper. And when it
right.
does, the end result, I mean, you know, we go to these openings and it's amazing.
Mhm.
And I will tell you that when I have been involved, and this is not stroking my ego, but when I have been involved at the very beginning, where the schematic is being drawn and where the decisions are being made, it's just so much easier. And, we make it sound like it's this whole package, everything that you've got to think about. It's really not this whole package everything you have to think about. You just have to hire the right people who already know how to think about it.
Okay. And
I'm the
get
one
them,
thinking of the
everyone
3
to
foundational
focus.
pillars.
Yes. And we just got to have everybody on the team focused at the same dot.
Exactly, exactly. But I
And
mean, then it becomes fun. You're not feeling like
yes,
you're scattered and you're trying to bring
no,
in business and you're desperate to figure this thing out. You've already built in the revenue pods. You've already built in the psychic revenue pods. You were already looking
correct.
on the 3 foundational pillars to increase your business. And you're just working on those 3 foundational pillars as you're fulfilling the revenue pods.
Okay. So
And
I'm going to
that's
say
how
my
it all
phrase
happens.
again. I'm going to say, sorry to interrupt,
Not
design
at
by
all.
default, design by default. So all that happens by default. Why? Because when the first customer comes in, they don't know the thinking and the communication that happened 12 months prior
Exactly.
to make it an easy, excellent experience.
Mhm.
And I have to tell you, Bruce, so many restaurants just feel thrown together. When I go to openings, I just feel like I'm in a restaurant that hasn't even had a proper run through. They're just so eager to get open and they just, they're not following the foundational pillar rules, the foundational revenue pods that they can instill. And once, like I said, once you have those revenue pods in place, then it's fun. Then it becomes this creative exercise on how you can increase the number of clients, increase the size of the transaction, increase the number of times they return based on what you've got built in as your revenue pods. And then it becomes a very creative exercise. And people enjoy being included in that creative advertising marketing world. They like being included in your world. They want to be back in your restaurant because you've shown some creativity rather than just slapping yourself out there and going, okay, we're opening our doors and we just want you to buy our food.
It doesn't work that way. So when you put the whole package together, when you see a smooth opening and everybody's trained properly, that operational team, the only thing you have to do is manage the machine that was created. Here's the instruction manual.
Exactly.
You just need to manage the machine that we designed and built for you. It
Right.
doesn't have to be a disaster.
I'll tell you, and it saves, not only hundreds of thousands in design flaws and issues, lost revenue because of design flaws, it saves hundreds of thousands in marketing and advertising spend because you've thought it through from the beginning on a very strategic and leveraged platform. And that's all the difference.
Well, it's because it's not trial and error. It's
Exactly.
not a trial and error. When you have, and you've seen them, I've seen them, trial and error openings. We're going to try this. Well, I'm not sure. We didn't have a good response for a week, so we're going to change a complete menu. Well,
Yeah,
what did they
that
learn in a
happens.
week?
I've
They
seen
didn't.
it.
Yeah, you've seen it. I've seen it. You go to
I've
the
seen it.
opening and somebody says, "Hey, how was the opening?" You tell me, "Oh man, you got to have this dish. It's excellent." Well, a friend goes 10 days later and says they didn't have it on a dish. It was I don't know what menu you were talking about because the menu that I seen totally different. That's
Yeah,
suicide. That's
it is.
restaurant management suicide.
It is. It is. And I can't tell you how many times I've taken pictures of the day opening menu, which I never put out to the public because I know what the restaurants are going to do. And sometimes they decide, okay, well, we started too big, we're going to go a little smaller, whatever. But all these people will publish the menu from the first day because they were there and everything changes on the menu. You're like, no. And one of the other things too is to remind people that, you know, Bruce and I can come into a restaurant after it's been in operation for a year or 2 or 3 and help change up, help do minor renovations, help change
Yes.
up the psychic revenue renovations, and help change up what's being done to bring the client in to increase the size of transaction and all that kind of thing. It can happen anywhere along the way. It's not like now that you're in the business, you're like, oh, we're screwed. We can't make this happen. No, this is where we typically come in is when it's not going well. And it's so much better to come in when you're planning and staging from the very beginning. But we can do it.
Correct.
We can help.
Well, but I'm going to tell you the biggest flaw in design, and I don't know if you've noticed or not, but being able to sit in the dining room and look into the kitchen or the dish pit. from the dining room.
Mm-hmm.
Biggest
Mhm.
disaster of a design you could possibly see.
I agree.
I mean,
Yeah.
the dish pit isn't
No.
something that you kind of dish pit and appetite doesn't work in the same sentence or the same piece.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
I
And I
agree.
can tell you, there's many designs that restaurants I go to, it's like unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And
No,
I can tell you
I
that
know.
I spend hours, I sit with my CAD and I draw lines into the kitchen, out of the kitchen and into the kitchen and make sure nobody, if you're a paying client, you're not looking. If it's an open concept, it's a different thing. But open concepts, I put glass from 48 inches up. I still don't let them, they still can't see in the back of the house.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, when you have an open kitchen, you're talking more about a concert symphony. You want that interaction between the guests and the chefs because it's a show,
Yes.
but you still don't need the dish pit to be part of the show.
No. No.
No.
Unfortunately, the dishwasher doesn't get any, he doesn't get any praise in that. But,
Yeah.
when,
Though he is extremely vital.
exactly. But, if you're doing 200 covers or 300 covers a night, I can tell you the cook line floor isn't nothing to look at,
No.
because there's not somebody going up and down the cook line every 3 minutes with a mop or a broom or a vacuum. That's just the cost. It's kind of like a carpenter making cabinets. I mean, the floor's covered with sawdust until he's done
Yeah.
at the end
True.
of the day and he sweeps the floor. Same thing.
Right. Agreed. It's messy. It's messy. And the psychic revenue, the client does not need to have that psychic revenue in their mind. So, yeah, that's not a psychic revenue pod. Well, I just wanted to, so we're going to shut this episode down, but we will be talking more marketing and branding and curb appeal. Bruce just sent me some amazing photos of before and afters that he has done. And I think we want to start sharing those on screen actually, so that you guys can see what the difference is between what a restaurant kind of looking a little worn out, aged, even before it's closed, and what you can do to refine it and change it immaculately. So we've got a lot of that going on. The branding is part of that marketing. It is part of that whole psychic
Yes.
thing that happens that does not involve spending advertising dollars, but it's a long-term effect and a long-term win for you. So we'll be going into a lot more of that in the days ahead and the weeks ahead. But thank you again, Bruce, for being here. All of
Thank
you,
you.
please go to our YouTube station. Please like, share, and subscribe. And make sure you check out our website, masteringrestaurantrevenue.com, and get involved in some of those contests we've got going on. And we'll talk with you again next week.
Thank you for joining Bruce and Diane on this journey of mastering restaurant revenue. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback helps them deliver even more of what you want to hear. Until next time, keep refining your approach, stay passionate about your craft, and here's to your restaurant's continued success.